Hi everyone, today we're going to paint the sunflower in watercolor. Supplies for today, I've got a 2B pencil and an eraser. I've got two brushes, a size 8 round brush and then a size 1 round brush for detailed work. I've got a palette of paints, a palette for mixing, a spray bottle of water and tissue paper and water. And I'm going to use Himalayan pink grinding salt in one of the layers to do the salt effect. Today I'm going to be painting on Baohong 100% cotton paper in a size 310 by 230 millimeters or 12.2 by 9 inch. This paper has got a 300 GSM weighting and is on a block, so is pre-stretched, and I won't have to tape it to my table. I'm going to start with my pencil sketch already done on the paper. The free downloadable and traceable sketch reference for this can be found using the link in the description box below or by going to my website, which is travelsketcher.net. Because of the light yellow color that we're going to use for the sunflowers, I'm going to erase the pencil lines quite a bit so that they don't show through. I'm going to use a kneaded eraser because that causes the least damage to the cotton fibers of my page, and I'm going to rub out as much as I can just so that I can still see the outline but that most of the graphite is lifted. Now I will spray my paints to activate them. We're going to work this in layers, and in the first layer I'm going to work wet and wet. I'm going to prepare some Hansa yellow light, which is the lightest color of yellow that I can see on the painting. I'm going to prepare it here. Then I'm going to wet the entire yellow part of the flower, and maybe I'll even go into the center as well afterwards. But I'm going to put Hansa yellow light over all of the petals as my underlayer, and then I will do additional layers on top of that once it's dry. I'm going to make it a very watery mix because this is the underlayer and I want to keep the layer as light as I can so that the color that I'm putting down now just becomes a highlight in the additional layers that I put on top. So I haven't rinsed the paint off my brush, I'm just letting that be incorporated into this first wash. I'm just adding a little bit of the yellow to the water that I'm putting down, just that it makes it easier to see where I've got the water on the page and where I don't. I'm putting enough water down that the layer remains glistening with water, but that it's not pooling on the surface. I want to be able to still add in some paint here just now, so I need to work quickly, but and to not let it dry. But I also don't want to put too much water down on the page that it makes pools or that it goes out of the lines. Okay, I think I've got a moist layer down now over all of the petals. I'm just making sure that there is still moisture here where I worked first. And now I will go and pick up some of the Hansa yellow light here that I've prepared and just put it on the petals where I can see the lightest color in the photograph. The color will blend out, and that's absolutely fine. It's very easy to become too heavy-handed with the yellow at this stage. Just keep in mind that we're wanting to retain the transparency of the color, and we're just doing a slight increase in the intensity of the light yellow in the areas that we can see it. If I add too much pigment in this first layer, that will be what makes the painting look a little bit overworked at the end, and that it will ultimately lose its transparency, which is what we're wanting to retain with it being watercolor. We never use the paint directly from the well because it's quite sticky and very intense in color inside the well, so that's why we'll always mix it with some degree of water. The less water we use, the more intense or concentrated the color will be. But it's not an acrylic paint. We don't work directly from the well. We use water as the medium to transfer and mix the color onto the page. I think I'm not going to wet the center now. I don't want any color that I put in the center to bleed into the flowers, into the petals. So I'm going to let this layer dry now completely before I work any further. Now that that's completely dry, I can proceed with the next layer. I think I'm going to mix some New Gamboge into the yellow color that I've got there already to add some darker areas to the petals. So I'm going to work through leaf by leaf. This is the second layer. I think I'm probably going to do 3 layers, but I'm going to start by adding a little bit more color to each of the petals. I'm going to try and preserve some of the accent color, the accent yellow that I can see. So whilst I'm adding some yellow here, if I can see a little line of lighter, I'm going to leave that. So that's why I'm working wet on dry in this layer. Leaving these lighter accent areas is really going to be what makes the whole thing pop at the end. I realize I've made an error here. This is supposed to be 2 little green stalks that are coming out the back there. I think I'm going to convert this into a petal, and then I'll add some of those stalks later. I've done the same thing here, but I think I can recover this here with just putting green on it later. I think I'm going to make some Hansa yellow medium here, just so I can get 2 kinds of yellow into this layer if I want to. Like here on this petal, it's a bit of a sort of a crease in the petal there, but it's not in shadow. I'm going to do that in a lighter yellow. Likewise here, maybe I'll start with the Hansa medium. And then come with the New Gamboge and put a bit of that in. So it's really just about building up these layers here and adding variations in color and texture that will make it look more realistic at the end. This petal here is completely in the sun, and so I want to preserve its bright color. I'm going to leave that for now and make a decision later, but it's these sort of contrasts with the very light against the dark that is really going to give it a three-dimensional look. So I can't go back if I make it too dark. So that one I'm going to leave for now. Also this one, which is very bright, I'm going to leave. You will see that when I'm working in these small areas, I tap off my brush from time to time. I do that if I feel that I've got too much pigment on the brush and that using it that way will cause pooling on the page. This is the first shadow sort of color that I'm using. I'm going to come in with an even darker shadow color in the next layer, but that's what all of this building up is about. I will do more of the veins and more of the details in the next layer. We're starting to get to the lighter side of the flower here. I'm going to use more of the Hansa yellow medium than the new gamboge as I get to the side. I wish I'd rubbed out my pencil lines more because this is still going to show through the finished sketch. But there's nothing I can do about it now if there's paint already on the sketch. This is the fold over here, so I can do this a bit darker. There's also a bit of shadow on this one. There's quite a lot of shadow in here. I'm going to go quite heavy on the New Gamboge. Just going to leave a little yellow highlight on the edge, but basically I'm going to do the rest in New Gamboge. This one's still in shadow, so it's slightly different to the photo. So this is going to be catching the full light. This one is still in shadow, so I'm going to do New Gamboge under here for this one. There's a bit of a shadow like that. This one, I think I'm just going to get a little bit of the lighter yellow. A little bit of that, but leave it to catch the light. This one's in shadow. Start with the slightly lighter yellow. Cast shadow here. I've left out this one down here. Right, let me just do that. So this is another very light one again. I'll just put a little bit of veins on it and leave it. Alright, so this one, whilst the light colour is still on my brush, I'll just do a bit of that. And now I'll pick up the New Gamboge to do some shadow. Straight line here. It's a bit dark. And there's a bit of medium shadow here. Okay, then this one, it's got a fold over. Do that there, but it's definitely catching the light there. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. I'm going to let that dry before doing the next shadow layer. I'm going to use quinacridone gold now in the next layer to do some of the deeper shadows, and I'm going to shift to the smaller brush now so that I can do some finer details. So in this petal here, I'm going to put the quinacridone gold down first. But then I'm going to do a bit of blending to blend the colour outwards. I'm going to put in the shadow line that I'm aiming for first, and then I'll fill in. And then I'll send out some darker edges to the veins that I've already done. And there's a bit of a shadow in here. And then I'm just going to drop in some darker along this inner edge again. This petal's got a shadow here. There's a bit of an edge to the one vein here that I'm going to leave the highlight for. Just going to work a little bit wet and wet here so it's not too intense. And drop the quinacridone gold in now. I want to really preserve this light coloured petal, so I'm putting the dark contrast colour against it, but making sure I don't touch it. Alright, this is the petal that I made up. Again, there's the light vein, so I'm going to put a contrast colour against it here. And then blend it. Dampen and then tap off my brush, just so it's got some water on, but not too much. And then there's quite a lot of shadow down here. I think I'm going to work wet and wet just so that it blends out nicely. I'm just going to put water on the bottom part of this petal. I want fairly concentrated quinacridone gold. I'll drop it in from the bottom. Oops. And then you can see that me having put the water down first, it can blend naturally upwards now from the dark bottom. And then I'll just pull up along the edge of these veins a bit of a darker edge. And there was darker along this edge here. And then I'll clean and slightly dry my brush and just blend it, preserving that little edge of the vein there. Any time that we can get a dark contrast like this against the light is really going to make this stand out once we get to future layers. Alright, so this petal's got a dark vein around the along the center here. I'm going to put that and then blend it out. I want to preserve this light edge of this petal and get it contrasting up against the back petal here. And there's shadow down on the inside here. So again, I am going to work wet and wet. Just put some water down first beyond the level where I want it to blend. Then come with the more concentrated quinacridone gold and drop it in at the bottom. Let it blend upwards. Maybe I'm just going to leave a tiny bit on my brush there and just do something different here, just so that I can define the edge of this petal here. Alright, this back one, I can't really see what's going on, but I'm going to do the darker central vein. This back one is in quite a lot of shadow. What I think I'm going to do is work entirely wet and wet on this layer so that I can get a nice contrast against this light edge of this petal that's further towards the front. So I'm going to put my water down first. I'm not going to make it too concentrated, but put some quin gold on my brush and then just let it blend towards the light. So this petal has got that nice dark vein up the center. I think I'll put the vein down first and then blend it out. This color is getting a little bit sticky on my palette. I don't want it sticky, otherwise the consistency is too thick, so I'll just add a bit of water. I'm going to get that darker color but in a thinner consistency and then just do bit more veins here. I'm going to let that dry a little bit, and I'm going to come and do a graded shadow up like that. Oh, I see I've got a bit of an edge to my shadow here on this petal. I'm just going to go up and, before it dries completely, just blend that. I didn't want a solid edge there. Just got to keep an eye on what these things do after we move away from them. I will come and put that line in again just now. So here I'm going to do the same thing that I'm doing there, and that is put the central vein first. And this line is a bit thick. I really should have preserved the light here. I'm just going to see if I can lift it at all. Okay. And likewise I'll do some veins down here. And I'm not going to do them in this area that's the lightest. Okay, I'll come back to the graded shadow here. I'm going to let this dry. I don't want the same thing to happen as what happened here. So on this petal, there's going to be that nice light accent here. I'm going to do shadow along the inside and grade it out. I just want it a bit darker, contrasting against the light edge. And I'll do that one more time on this petal over here. This is the very light area here. I want to preserve that. I'm going to do it just on the left of that. And then blend it left again. I'm going to leave that light one there. And maybe I'll do it one more time. I'm going to fill in this vein here. Okay, I can't quite see what's going on here. So this is going to be another petal behind these two. So maybe I'm going to do wet and wet with quite a concentrated shadow down here, blending it up just so that I push this petal back behind the ones that are in front. That darker contrast against this petal here will push the lighter one forward and push this one that I'm busy doing back. I'll skip these two to allow this one to dry. I'm going to work on this one now. It's also not exactly the same as the photograph, but it is behind this one, so I'm going to start with a graded wash up here and then maybe do some of the veins up at the top. I want to preserve those light yellow accent lines at the top, so I'm not going to put water over the whole petal, just down here. I've put water here and I didn't want that. I'm just going to try and lift. I'll come back to this. I don't want to make the whole thing too dark. Okay, I can work on this one safely. It's got a nice light edge to it. So I'm going to, I think, start with, I don't want to load my brush too much, some veins from the back here. I'm going to leave the light edge there. and the light edge on the left. This one's actually facing the sun. I've got this annoying pencil line here which I wish wasn't there. So I think I'm going to make this a folded away from us, so in shadow, and then this part of the petal facing towards the light. So I'll do a dark edge here. So that can be on the shadow side. I want some very watery consistency, Quin Gold. Just in there and in there. Okay, this one, it's got more of a shadow here because of the bend, but it's also got the yellow accent over here. So I think what I'm going to do is start with a central vein, knowing that I want to preserve the yellow. And then I'll just do a bit of blending. I'm going to blend some of the shadow here. And then just send one of these there. And I'm going to shadow this edge so that it can contrast against the light one behind it. And just preserve a yellow line there. These two I'm going to come and do the graded shadow from the inside out. I think I'm going to use my bigger brush just to wet the whole petal. It's dry now, so it's not going to shift. I don't want that hard edge to the shadow like I got there. That's the reason why I'm wetting the whole petal. Getting that nice contrast against the light colored petal in front. Alright, let's have a look at this one. Again, it's got one or two really nice yellow edges. I'm going to leave a yellow edge and do one of those all the way to the top. And then this is the sunny side. Maybe I'll just water down my brush a bit, just do just a bit like that. I'll come back and do the graded shadow from the base. This petal at the back, I want some contrast against the ones that are in front. I'm just going to establish where the edge of that is. Put some water down first. And I want to drop a heavy shadow into the point here and then grade it up. This one's a little bit like this one. I'm not going to go crazy dark, just get some contrast in the petal itself. It's a bit dark. Just going to soften the edges a bit here. All right, let's have a look at this one. It's pretty light, that one. I think what I'm going to do is actually start with a graded shadow here, but not with the quinacridone gold. I think I'm going to go Hansa yellow medium. So I'll work wet and wet and wet that petal, because it's catching the light so nicely there. It looks like new gamboge. I'm going to get some Hansa yellow medium. Yeah, that's enough. This one at the back's even lighter. I'm not even going to touch it. Alright, so this one has got some really light parts against some really dark. So I'm going to pick up some quin gold here and just do along the edge of the veins that I've already got there. And then this is in shadow, so I can really push that. I think I'm going to work wet and wet. Wet this whole area. And the shadow is darkest along the edge. I'll do the same thing for this one. I'm always leaving those very light under areas and working on the areas that are already slightly darker. This one's facing the sun, but there's a bit of shadow here, so I'm not going to go crazy, but I do want to get some contrast against the petals that are above. So I'm going to work wet and wet. It's quite a lot of water I put down. And then just get some of this into the point. But this tip here that's facing the sun, I don't want the shadow to go all the way to that, just so that there's a difference between these two petals here. I'll leave this one for now and move to here. So here we've got some shadow again because this petal is facing away from the sun. I think I'll do the lines first and then come and do the graded shadow next. Alright, I'm going to do very strong shadow in here, I think. I'm going to do the very deep shadow here and then blend it out. I'm actually going to stop at the end of this shadow line here so that nothing goes further than that, just to really accentuate this sunlit tip. but I really want to push this shadow dark. Yeah, that's really going to make these petals above pop forward. And I think I'll do the same down here. I'm not going to extend beyond this shadow line, stop here. And I think I'll do the same here. I'm moving all around the painting here, and I don't want to risk putting my hand over something and smudging it. And I also am happy to pause here, let it dry, and just so that I can reestablish again where I am with reference to the photo, and then decide what I'm going to add and do these blended areas as well. But let's let it dry first and then come back to it. Now that the layer is completely dry, I'm going to work a little bit more on the right hand side of the flower here and the petals here that I didn't get to in the first layer. I'm going to start with, I think, this petal and do some shadow on the inside here and blend it upwards. I'm going to work wet and wet to do that. So I'm going to wet the entire petal with clean water. And then I'll use quinacridone gold and drop it in at the base. Then I'll skip the next one for now, and this light petal behind here, I just want to do some quite deep shadow right here in this crack, and I'm going to use my fine point brush to do that. So I'm going to get my quinacridone gold really concentrated. I want to get some nice contrast against this petal here that will be nice and bright in the sunlight. So I'm doing a dark contrast line there, and then I will blend it outwards. I still want that tip to be nice and bright because it's going to be catching the sunlight. So I'll skip this one and then come to this one, and I'm going to do the same thing with putting the quin gold at the base and then blending it upwards. I just want to think of where my contrast will be with the adjacent petal. I think on this one I'm going to have a dark edge here, or darker edge here, and blend it to light. So that means on this petal I want to leave this area light so that there's a contrast. So I'm going to go darker here, and then blend it lighter towards here, but leave this area lighter. Just so that I get separation between the petals and contrasting colors next to each other. So whilst I'll wet the whole petal because I don't want any hard edges, I'm not going to fill it. Okay, so I'll skip this one and come to this one. I'm also going to do really deep shadow here in the crack and then blend it outwards with the most light catching over here at the edge. I think I'll change to this. I really want it quite concentrated but not sticky, but I'm just increasing the intensity and getting a bit of water on the Quin Gold. That's blending nicely. I want to get a stronger intensity right here in the crack. And maybe I'll try and just pull up one or two darker lines. Not too intense though. Alright, so this one is catching quite a lot of light over here, which I want to preserve, but then it's got a cast shadow on the petal here. Maybe I'm going to start with this more New Gamboge color, just because it's got quite a lot of light. I'm going to map out the shadow with that and then see if I'm going to come in with something darker. So I'm almost using this as my wet layer. And then I'll drop in the darker color here on the edge, let it blend. I also want to do just the smallest bit of dark color and blend it up here, because there's a sort of a crease in the petal. I can do this one next. It is almost entirely in shadow. We've already done the cast shadow there. I can darken that now. Just got a bit too much water. I'm just tapping off my brush and lifting some of the water. Likewise, I think on this petal now, I'm going to do the Quin Gold shadow here and blend it out to the edge of this line. I'm also going to increase the shadow on this one. Alright, so what have I missed? Alright, I'm going to go and do some dark at the base of this petal and blend it up. I'm going to do the same on this one. So this petal's catching a lot of light. It is almost entirely a very light color. I think what I'm going to do is just get one or two veins in the yellow. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay, on this one, I'm going to have the angled shadow. This one is nearly dry. I just want to exaggerate the veins. I think I've lost them a little bit. I don't make them too dark, but I want them to be present. Okay, this one I'm going to do a bit of shadow here at the base. I'm going to put one or two veins on this one. Same on here. I'm going to put some veins back in here. That was a bit dark. I want this petal to really stand out, so I'm going to do a bit more of a shadow here. There is that cast shadow here that I'm going to darken. This one I'm going to give a lightish vein. Okay, I could keep going, but I think I'm going to let that dry and then reassess once it's dry. I'm going to work on the center of the sunflower now, and I'm going to be using Himalayan pink salt to put a salt effect in the middle in a bit. But I'm going to start and work the whole layer wet and wet. I'm going to just pick up a light yellow just so that I can get a yellow base layer and fill the entire area here with that color. Then I'll pick up some more concentrated New Gamboge color, dot that around the center, the Quin Gold. I just want to get a few various different colors in here to get some differentiation and also some texture. Now I'll get some burnt umber, quite concentrated, starting from the center here, around the center. Then I'm going to go for raw umber. You can see that I'm using this quite concentrated in a thick consistency and dotting it around the edge and the darkest areas of the center of the sunflower that I can see. This thicker consistency means that the dots that I put down won't spread out as much, and they will remain the darker accent areas of the center of the sunflower. I might even add some alizarin crimson in with that raw umber, because I can see there's a sort of reddish tinge to some of that, and it's a nice color to add. It's going to dry quite a bit lighter because the layer is so wet, and also that I'm putting the salt in. So I certainly don't want to do this layer again after I've done the salt effect. So that's why I'm pushing it quite dark. I think I need to push the center a bit. I'm just going to use my fine point brush just to define those edges around those bright petals. Just make sure I'm not leaving any of the light bits out. I don't want any light bits at the edges here. I want to get a bit darker in here just to get contrast against those light petals. When we put the ground salt down now, it's always a point of anxiety, I think, because sometimes it can work and sometimes it doesn't. It's important that the layer is not too dry, because then there is no moisture for the salt to absorb. But also if it's too wet, then it also then can fail. So I've got some glistening moisture remaining, but it's not pooling. I'm going to grind the salt. Put some in my hand, and then I'm just going to sprinkle it. The bigger grains work way better than just normal fine salt. Maybe I'll get a bit more. Now it's important that we leave that entirely alone until it has dried naturally, and which can now take longer than it normally would if there wasn't salt. So I'm going to leave this for at least a half hour just to do its thing, and then come back when it's completely dry. I've waited about 20 minutes and I think that the salt is still busy doing its thing. So I'm going to leave that for now and take the opportunity to do a base layer on my petals. Because I'm going to want to have very light colored veins, I'm going to do that as a base color and then come in later with a darker layer on top. But learning my lesson from the veins and the outline of the petals here, I'm just going to erase the lines on my leaves a bit more before I do this lighter base color. Then I'm thinking about what color to do as the base. I think I'm going to use Serpentine Genuine. Use whatever green you've got. I don't want too bright a green. I'm looking for an earthier looking green, as you can see here. But I'm going to really water it down. So that's why it doesn't really matter. As long as it's a realistic base green color, I'm going to really water it down and cover the whole leaf, both leaves with that color, and the stem as well. I think it's granulating. There should be a bit more green. You can see as I pick it up now, it starts going a bit greener. That's the thing with Serpentine Genuine. It's a granulating color, so the browner color might have been settled at the top there. I'm just going to turn this around so that my hand doesn't touch the salt. And I really want to keep it light, so I think I'm just going to lift some of the color I've put down. I'm going to do the same green color on all of the green that's down here. Okay, again, I'll leave that all to dry now. Now that I'm sure that the salt is completely dry, I'm going to remove it now. I'm going to brush it off gently. It does stick in places sometimes. And then I'm just going to brush it into the bin. I'm really happy with the texture that the salt has given here, but you can see that it does make the whole layer dry quite a lot lighter because it absorbs and pulls so much of the water up with it. So I'm going to do one more layer on the center here just to try and get some darker contrast areas. I'm going to work wet and wet in the center, so I'm going to start by putting a layer of water down first. Because that first layer is completely dry, the colors won't lift or shift as I put water on top of them now. Then I think I'm going to work with a smaller brush so that I don't make the spots too big. I'm going to pick up this darker contrast color. I think I'm just going to make it a bit thicker. And then with this thicker consistency, I'm just going to drop it around in little dots around the darkest edge of the center of the sunflower. Just adding a bit of burnt umber there. And now as I move towards the center of the sunflower, I will mix the darker color with some of the quinacridone gold. I want to push the outside edges really dark so that I get a nice contrast against the yellow petals. So I'm adding some sepia here just to push this even darker. And going right up to where it meets the petals. And particularly here against the lightest petals so that we get the biggest contrast. I'm using a darker color now, and the water layer is drying and the paint is a thicker consistency. For all those reasons, the color will blend less and be a far more darker and contrasting color than that which is underneath it. And then I'm going to be really conservative and just do really tiny dots here, but just to get a bit of contrast in the center. And I'll just keep on adding these darker dots in the center of the darker dots that I've already done so that I can retain the lighter areas in between. I don't want it all to be the same tone or color. So I'm making sure to reserve the lighter areas and then dotting this down inside the darker dots that I've already done, just to push their contrast further. I still feel that in this top area here I could go darker. I'm going to pick up that sepia more. I feel that this really is my last chance, that I'm not going to do another layer on the center, otherwise it's going to get too dark. And then maybe just a bit over here where there's the shadow on this side. It's getting drier now, so the color that I'm putting down is spreading less. Right, so I'm going to call it a day at that and let this layer dry. I'm going to work on the leaves now, and I've just turned the painting to the side so that I can work from top to bottom down this leaf. And I'm going to do a layer where I'm now going to make the veins of the leaf stand out. I'm not going to do much texturing, I don't think, in this layer. I'm going to see, but I'm going to specifically work at negatively painting around where these veins are using a slightly darker color. So I think I'm going to build on the green that I've already got, but I want it now a little bit more vibrant and brighter. So to the green that I've got there, I'm going to add a bit of sap green. Guaranteed I'm going to run out, so I'm just going to mix both together, so I've got enough to do both leaves, hopefully. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So using the small brush, I'm going to identify the veins that I'm wanting to preserve and just work on either side of them. The nice thing about this is I've got time, because each of the areas can be segmented, so I don't have to worry about my paint drying. And I think maybe because I'm going to work segment by segment, maybe I will take this opportunity to put a bit of texture in each of the sections, working wet and wet. So I've got that color down. And I'm quickly going to mix up one or two other different greens. This is undersea green, which is slightly darker. Mixing with the sap. Maybe I'll add the tiniest bit of burnt umber to it. Because then what I can do is, in the darker areas, I can drop some of that just to get some texture to the leaf. And even what I think I'm going to do is prep some yellow. And I can dot that around here. I'm going to lift in the middle because it's darkest closest to the veins. And I'm just going to drop in darker still in here. Although that's ultimately going to be a much darker shadow when I come and do the next layer. Okay, so in this section, I need to avoid this vein here, also the start, the side of the central vein, and the side of this one. So the wetter I work, the more time I'm going to have. So I don't mind it being really light and really watery, and I can drop in more color later. Alright, I'm going to put a bit more colour in along the centre and edges here. As it gets further out, it's going to get lighter. And there's a bit of yellowy detail along the outer edge. I'm going to pick up this yellow down. I don't know if you can see it at the very bottom. It's a new gamboge. And then I just want to pause for a moment just to explain what's going on here. I want to make this cut off square. So I should have probably done it when I started, but I didn't think of it. So I'm going to tape it off now, just so in my mind I can see where the end is going to be. I really want the most focus to be on the flower, so I think I'm actually going to cut it off here. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to carry on the next section here, doing the same thing. Alright, I'm going to drop a thicker consistency in along the edge. And then pick up some yellow. My brush is a bit too dry, it's lifting the paint rather than putting colour down. Right, and then what remains of this little section down here Okay, let's now go and do exactly the same thing on the other side of this leaf. This leaf curls under here, so it's got quite a lot of dark at the bottom. Again, I want to contrast against this yellow by making a darker edge. Put some shadow under here. It's gone a little bit dark in that area. I'm just going to lift some of the color and then put some of the lighter green down. Okay, now we're going to turn it around and go and repeat exactly the same thing on the other side. This leaf has got the fold over where this section is folded over and is catching a bit more light than underneath. So I'm going to leave that till the end and work around it. Maybe what I'm going to do is get my pencil and just put that line in a bit more clearly. I've also lost the from the veins a bit. Okay, I'm going to go with that. There's not really a shadow on this in the photograph, but I'm wanting to push this contrast, so I think it's completely feasible that there would be a darker shadow on this leaf under the petals. So I'm pushing it darker to get that contrast against the light colored petals. Okay, I'm going to avoid the folded over edge and work on this side. I want quite a contrasting edge against this folded over. I'm going to make this folded over piece be the one that's facing the sun. So let's say that it's casting a shadow on the underneath. I realize I haven't really done the yellow edges on this leaf. I forgot. I'm just going to add a little bit now on the areas that I can, which is really just the last two zones that I've worked in. That's fine. I'll see after it's dry if I need to do any more. Just add a spot more contrast against this vein. Great, I'm going to let that dry. Or maybe, actually, let me turn and work along the central stalk and see what we can do there. Okay, with the central stalk, I think I'm going to do the darker shadow areas, and then I'll do the lines, these lines that are on the grooves later. So I've already got the shadow going. I'm going to add a bit of raw umber because there's really is quite a dark shadow, particularly up at the top. And I'm not going to water it down too much, particularly in these very dark shadow areas. And I'm going to drop this shadow color in. I really feel that even in the depths there, I can go even darker. I'm going to get some sepia. Just add that to the top up there that I can touch into. Always, always trying to push contrasts as much as I can. Yeah, that looks better. I'll come back and do that other one just to keep them separate. I'm going to go back and do this one. That one's so dark that I think I'm going to add some neutral tint just to separate it from the other. Okay, I'm going to work on the main stalk now, and I'm going to work wet and wet. I'm going to wet it, put some shadow at the top. I want to preserve the cast shadow in the one area here. I'm just going to maybe pencil that out for myself. Okay, so... Now I'm going to drop in the very dark shadow color up at the top. That's okay for now. Now I'm going to work on the folded over section. I want it to be a slightly different color green to this. I think I'm just going to work wet and wet and drop in some texture. I'm happy with that. I'll do the cast shadow on the leaf in here after it's dry. I'm going to work on the veins on the stalk now. I'm going to use the darkest color, and I'm going to work wet on dry here. I'm going to line it up with the edge of this shadow that I've created here. And then I'm going to blend it outwards. I'm going to rinse and tap off my brush. And on the left hand side, I'm going to try and soften the edge. I'm going to leave the right hand side quite sharp because that's the side that's been caught by the light. I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to lighten up the shadow as I go over the bright area here. And again, I'll clean and dampen off, tap off my brush and then blend this to the left. I'm losing my hard edge there. I'm just going to add a bit more color along that edge. I'm going to do that cast shadow in this corner here. I'm picking up a really dark color because the shadow is really intense. I'm going to add one or two in here as well because I think that really is creating some nice contrast there. And I think down here I'm going to add another. Now I'm going to go up here and work on those cast shadows on these leaves, this leaf up here. Again, a very intense dark shadow, so I'm pushing it really, really dark. See, I've got a little bit of shadow on the yellow here, which is a bit upsetting. I'm going to see if I can lift it at all. Right, so I'm going to let that dry and then assess. I want to be quite brave now and increase some of the contrast in the leaves, or in the petals, just that little bit more. And what I'm going to do that is I'm going to work with the Quin Gold again, which I was using as the shadow color, and I'm going to add the smallest amount of alizarin crimson to it, just to darken it and give it that reddish tinge, because you can see in the photograph there is some reddish color in the very depths of some of those of some of those petals. I think that's a great contrast color for the really darker parts of each of the petals. So I think I'm going to work wet on dry and not do all of them, just the ones that have got the most shadow, like this one. Put that in and then blend it. Particularly these petals at the back. I like this color I'm working with, but it's a bit watery. I just want to thicken its consistency on the palette. There's this little piece in here that's behind. You see, by pushing that even darker, look how it pushes this petal that I'm working on back. Here I'm just going to do some definition at the base. And then this one is behind. This was the one that I was unsure of. I think I'm going to do this area in here, the really dark color. That'll separate what is going on here. Okay, I think I can definitely do in here. get some darker contrast against my lightest areas on the painting, I'm going to do that. So that's why I'm doing this sort of thing against this very light coloured petal. Where else? Maybe I'll do one vein over here. There was this little leaf that I had painted incorrectly in the first layer. I'm going to correct that now. I think getting that little bit of green in here is important. And there were one or two others up here. I'm just going to add one or two in. Yeah, I think that's fine. Maybe one over here. I think this additional contrast layer has really made the world of difference to the contrast in the petals here. I think it was really worth it. Maybe I'm just going to do one or two little areas here. Yeah, that looks nice. And I'll do one over here. Right, I'm going to leave it to dry. I am going to work on the sky area now. I've also taped a little bit on the right hand side here because I'm wanting to bring the painting in a little bit so that it's slightly more square than I had originally planned. So these are the two sides that I've taped. I'm going to start by preparing some cobalt blue in the well here because with the sky it's quite a big area and we're going to have to work quite quickly once we start putting the color down, and it is quite tricky work using water to cut around all the edges of the petals here. So I'm going to prep the color first and then do my water wash. I think I'm going to work maybe in two stages with the sky because I don't want edges forming. So I'll do the top half maybe ending down here and then I'll do the other. So I'm going to use a mop brush. This is a size 5 mop brush just because I can get more water down onto the page. I want to wet the entire area and then with water and then cut around the sides. I'm going to do as much as I can with the mop brush and then move to a smaller brush to get around the edges of the petals. I'm just going to move the paint palette out of the way because I might need to move the painting around. Maybe I'll start this way and then I'll rotate it. Well, actually I'll start here and then I'll rotate it clockwise as I go. I want to give myself time to work on the sky layer, so I am putting quite a lot of water down. it's quite important that I don't go over the edges of the petals here. So I need to work quite carefully. And one can also decide if you want a solid blue background like in the photograph, you can. I just think it's a little bit risky to do solid blue because it's so difficult to get a perfectly even wash on such a big area. And I also want to give the effect of clouds. So I'm going to do an uneven wash with the cobalt blue to give the impression of clouds. I can see the water is pooling on the edge here, so that's maybe a bit too much. I'm just going to lift some from the side. Okay, so now with the prepared cobalt, I'm going to go in with my mop brush. I'm going to come in quite strong on the corners. You can see it really is quite wet with the amount of spreading that I'm getting. Maybe a bit more than I would like. So I will just go carefully. I'm going to put an effect of a bit of cloud over there. I always like to go the strongest in the corners, so I'm going to drop in more there. I'm going to lift a bit here. This is very wet. And over here I can see it's pooling. In the meantime, I mean, I've got time. I'm going to prep some more cobalt blue. The mop brush really does suck it up. I really do want to get some blue around the petals because that nice contrast will really set off the yellow color of the petals. So when I feel it's not too wet, I will go in around the edges there. Here I can see it's pooling. Okay, I'm going to leave that for now and then do the bottom half and see how we go. Oh, I think I must put some down here. I think it's this my last chance to darken the corners here, so I'm going to do that one more time. Right, let's do the same on the bottom. I'm going to be doing a bit of a graded wash here, so I'm wanting the blue more intense at the top and then getting less intense as we go down. So I'm actually going to just water down the cobalt here a bit because I don't want to go too strong with it in the bottom half. And also I won't do so much sort of cloud effect, just a more mottled effect. Yeah, I think that's done. I'll let it dry and then assess. Now that I've let it dry completely, I see that the one petal that I've ignored completely is this one here. It is in a bit of shadow and there is a cast shadow on the petal here. So I'm just going to work on this petal alone. And I think I'm going to just darken this green vein slightly. And then I'll blend it left. What I regret is not having extended the stalk all the way to the bottom because it's kind of floating. I realize I'm going to have to cut this off at the bottom, which isn't the end of the world, but it turns it back into being more rectangular than square. I think that's done. Now I will remove the page from the paper block. I'll take the tape off first. Then on the paper block there is an opening at the top here where we separate the sheets. I use a craft knife to do that, and I just hold the blade very flat so that I don't cut into the page itself, and then slowly push away from me. Then I'm going to use a guillotine just to cut it down to size. Okay, and then I'm going to cut off the bottom so that it's not floating. I'm not sure if that's going to be enough. Slight bit more. There we go. And there's the final painting. I'd really appreciate if you could give this video a like and give me a comment in the comment box below. Until next time, bye for now.